Hello, you two. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're all well and you're all staying safe. Today's lesson is going to be looking at a different country in the world and comparing it to the one that we live in, looking at similarities and differences. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. Hope you're ready. Okay, today we're going to compare Australia, which is the country here, all the way on the other side of the world, to our own, the UK, where we live. We're going to be thinking about similarities and we're going to be thinking about differences. We're going to start off by thinking where in the world the countries are. The United Kingdom is made up of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and it is in the Atlantic Ocean. So the ocean surrounding us is the Atlantic Ocean. Australia is a country and a continent surrounded by the Indian and Pacific Oceans. So you might already have noticed something that is different. The Australian flag. The Union Jack is in the upper left corner and it acknowledges the history of the British settlement. The white Commonwealth or Federation star has 7 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These points represent the unity of the 6 states and the territories of Australia that occurred on the 1st of January in 1901. The Southern Cross is shown on the right-hand side of the flag. The constellation of 5 stars can only be seen in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm just going to go back for a second. You might notice something similar to our flag. The weather in Australia. The weather in Australia changes over the year. Australia has different seasons of weather, just like we do. In Australia, the 4 seasons are summer, autumn, winter and spring. The seasons are identified by the group of calendar months which they belong to. In the summer, December, January and February, the weather is hot. Some parts of Australia are humid and other parts are dry. Let's have a think about that. The Australian summer is in December, January and February. I don't think that's when our summer is. Maybe you could note that as a difference. In autumn is March, April and May, when the weather becomes cooler. And the winter months are June, July and August. The weather is cold and rain and storms are common. Some places in Australia get snow. In spring, September, October and November, the weather becomes warmer. However, it's still very mixed. There can be rain, wind and cool days. Weather in the UK. You should know a lot about the weather in the UK as you live there. The weather in the UK also follows a seasonal pattern and is similar to the weather pattern in some parts of Australia, but is opposite in the corresponding months. The key word there is opposite. The winter months are December, January and February, which is where we usually see the coldest weather. In spring, March, April and May, the weather turns milder. It can still be wet and windy, especially in April. However, this April we've had some very nice weather. The average temperature is 11 degrees and the average rainfall is 5 centimetres. In summer months, June, July and August, the weather gets warmer and the average temperature goes up to around 19 degrees. And our autumn is September, October and November and sees the weather turning colder and wetter. Australian fruit. Australia grows many fruits, including apples, pears, bananas, citrus fruits, pineapples and mangoes. However, these are not native. That means they don't belong to the country originally. Some native fruits in Australia include finger lime, kangaroo apple, quandong, and the Davidson plum. Now, if I look at the lime here, it doesn't look like the limes that we have. The limes that I buy in my shopping are green and round like a sphere. A kangaroo apple doesn't quite look like the apples that we grow or we have. Quandong and a Davidson plum. I'd never heard of a quandong before, and I had to do some research. Maybe you can do that as well. Fruit in the UK. Gooseberries. Oh, a lovely gooseberry pie or crumble. Delicious. Black currants, plums, apples. These are all fruits that you should have heard of, maybe even tasted. Cherries, pears, strawberries. Let's have a look at the Australian houses, the types of homes that you might live in Australia. Oh, okay. So because the weather is very hot in Australia, some houses do have swimming pools to make sure, so to let their families cool down when it's very, very hot. Some people live in flats like this or apartments. We have apartments and flats. They don't look too dissimilar. You might say they look the same as ours. This is a house in Australia. Looks a little bit different to ours, but they are 2 stories. We do have houses that look like that. Let's have a look at our houses. See, we've got a terraced houses here when they're all lined up next to each other. Here's a house, a semi-detached house, because it's attached to another one. It's 2 stories. Doesn't have as much land as the Australian ones. And here we've got a cottage, which looks like it's in a rural place. That means a place where there's lots of countryside or grass. And that is a detached house because it's standing by itself. Australian beaches. Now, we have beaches as well. Do you think they're going to look the same? Here we go. Here's some pictures. We've got Bondi Beach. I've been there on my holidays. It's not too far from Sydney. And we've got Scarborough Beach. We've got a beach in Tasmania. They look very sandy. Some are a bit rocky. Do you think they look like our beaches or do you think they look different? Let's have a look. Our beaches tend to be very touristy and we tend to have promenades, which is what this here is called, where we have arcades and music and games for all the tourists to use, and we walk along it so we can get further out to sea. Our beaches look a bit more built up. This is Blackpool here. We do have some more secluded beaches like this though. And again, we've got some promenades that you can walk out to. Do you think they look the same or different? Maybe you could come up with a reason. School in Australia. School education in Australia is compulsory. That means you have to go between the ages of 5, 6 and 16 and 17. The Australian school year begins at the end of January and finishes in mid-December. We don't start school in January. We start school in September and we finish in July. So that's something that's different. The school year consists of 4 terms, which usually contains between 9 and 11 weeks each. The school system is 13 years long and is divided up into 3 sections: primary school, secondary school, senior secondary school. Now, we only have primary school and secondary school. That's something that is different. Their primary school runs to year 6, like ours does. Their secondary school, though, only runs from year 7 to year 10. And then their senior secondary school is year 11 and year 12. We call this sixth form or college. Right, now your task for today. I would like you to find a piece of paper and a pen, and I'd like you to put a line down the middle. And I want you to write some things about Australia that you've learned today on the Australia side of the paper, and some things that you've learned about the UK on the UK side of the paper. Then at the end, you can write these sentences. I have noticed that these countries are similar because. You might want to pause the presentation so that you can copy the spelling. I have noticed that these countries are different because. So we are comparing them. We're using comparison language. Look back at the presentation. You can use your mouse on your computer to move backwards to help remind you of the information that you're going to need for this task. So we've got some geography skills and some literacy skills here. Think about the oceans. Think about the weather. Think about homes that we live in. All the things that we've talked about today. Maybe you might make a decision then on where you would prefer to live. That could be another sentence. I would prefer to live in because. I wonder which one you choose. It's been lovely to share this with you today. I hope you learned something new, and I shall speak to you soon. Goodbye, everyone.